What is up, my ducks and drakes? Welcome to the Crowded Lake, and today we're going to be reading chapters 9 and 10 of Bad Moon Rising, a Senior Sites fanfic by Bekka911. If you want to support this amazing author or the amazing books that they write, go ahead and hit those links in the description to their Wattpad and to the story. While you're down there, check out the Google form where you can recommend fics for the future. We're wrapping up on this series and I'd love to see some good recommendations. The trigger warning list will also be in the description. With that being said, let's go on to Chapter 9. Mayday. Remus blinked, utterly thrown off by his companion's sudden and inexplicable fondness of Greek tragedies. What? He managed intelligently. Desi barely spared him a glance. Mayday. Come now, Remus. Surely you see the similarities. Mayday was scorned and abandoned by her husband, traded in for someone newer and shinier and better. It's not so unlike our situation with Virgil. Dee, I will encourage your comparison once you murder innocent children and poison some royalty. Your brother is a prince, is he not? Remus's lips tightened, an uneasy expression flickering across his face. You aren't poisoning Roman, no matter how tempting, not even to get back at Virgil. Desi glanced at him coolly, thin strips of shadow curling around his fingers pressed against his scale-burned cheek. His eyes were glowing faintly, glowing in his agitation. Is this brotherly love I sense, dearest Duke? His voice was disgusted, and his mouth curled into a scornful scowl. Remus jolted with the flush of indignation that zapped his bloodstream. No, he denied vehemently. He didn't care for Roman. It was the exact opposite. Remus would love for his pathetic, weak-minded brother to get taken away and locked up behind the wall like Deceit had been so long ago, but poisoning him? Killing him? Remus had his limits. Desi turned away and gathered a few pieces of wall in his hands. The shadows around him recoiled, tendrils of pure black scraping along his skin in an attempt to flee the eerie energy. All of us could have been so much more, Desi murmured gently. We could have done so much more. We just had to let down the wall. Remus had a feeling he knew what was starting to change in his companion. Of course, one couldn't spend so much time by the wall and not start to mutate within themselves. What happened to you? He asked cautiously, finding disinterest as he sat down cross-legged and picked at his black fingernails. He'd never been able to get them the way Virgil used to. Deceit made a small questioning noise. Well, Remus continued, you nearly did the same thing Virgil did. We locked you behind the wall as punishment, remember? I remember, Deceit hummed softly. Remus scratched at a piece of nail polish that was flaking off. Well, what happened? You came back with shadows etched into your skin and blood straining your teeth. That doesn't happen from doing nothing. Deceit turned, still crouching, and smiled. Remus did not get afraid, but seeing his friend, something suspiciously like terror flawed at his frozen heart. Deceit's smile was lopsided and too wide. There were too many teeth. Remus could almost imagine poison sliding down those barely visible fangs. This was the Deceit who had crawled out of the darkness. This was the Deceit that promised nothing but darkness and bad things. I sat in the darkness, almost Deceit said, still sounding caring and soft. I sat, and I looked, and the darkness looked back. I think Virgil could benefit from an experience like that, don't you? Remus frowned, resting his elbows on his knees and staring up at his companion. Deceit merely gathered some more pieces of the wall. That sounds like... Almost Deceit's smile turned envious. I think it's time we rebuild the wall. Desi could tell that Remus didn't like the idea, the Duke's nose scrunched up, apprehension evident on his features. God, Remus was a softie. Just like his brother. Granted, Roman was often more tolerable than Remus simply because he was so stupid and Deceit loved to play games with him. He would never actually poison the royal. He had standards. I understand you aren't pleased with this plan? His voice was low, his shadows wrapped around his neck in response. Remus jumped to his feet. Any sense of real emotion swept away and hidden behind his manic facade. Deceit was more amused than concerned. If Remus wanted to pretend, who was Deceit to stop him?
Last time, it took all the dark sides to put the wall together. What makes you think we could do it between us?
A fair point. Deceit could concede that it would be difficult. I have a feeling our new friend will lend us some strength, he said easily, anticipating that cold touch against his back of his thoughts. He laughed darkly. And I've changed since our last attempt with the wall. All will be well, grand old Duke. Remus scowled.
It'll take a lot of power, that's all I'm saying.
Deceit waved his hand flippantly. No bother. Of course, I will need to have my own reserves for my other projects, but it shouldn't be anything too damaging.
Other projects?
Remus repeated, narrowing his eyes. Deceit didn't even try and play innocent.
What games are you hiding, Deceit?
Such a loaded question for so early on in the partnership. Deceit's lips curled wryly, and he tilted his head, staring at Remus with keen eyes. It was fair enough, he supposed. Remus had a right to know, but some viciously petty part of Deceit wanted to let him flounder. How delightful it would be to watch Remus get torn apart and put back together by the deepest, darkest hidden parts of Thomas's consciousness. Deceit was so tempted. He sighed. Alas, he was obligated to share so that both of them would get out of this entire situation in one piece. The way to Virgil is through his friends, he answered reluctantly. Remus's mouth twitched, but he withheld his mocking laughter. Deceit allowed a cruel smile. We've already tried, Roman. Your work was quite excellent. Remus sketched a brow, grinning.
Oh, I thank you. I do so love messing with my dearest brother. He's so skittish. It's almost pathetic.
Deceit, very wisely, did not say that Remus's mostly one-sided rivalry with Roman was pathetic, and that he actually felt bad for Roman because the royal's fear was genuine every time Remus showed up. Instead, Deceit said, we know that Logan will be no help to our cause. He's too calm, rational.
I like him,
Remus said.
His neutral energy. Imagine having that much power. We could take it from him and use it for the dark sides. Deceit would rather fade, but okay. He gritted his teeth, managing not to spit at Remus's face. That would be rather undignified. Hence, he emphasized, Patton. Virgil values Patton's opinions above even Thomas's. Turning Patton against him will force him to isolate himself. And that, my dearest Remus, is when we will strike. Remus's answering smile was genuinely terrifying. If Deceit were anyone but himself, he would actually feel disconcerted or unsettled. Unfortunately, he was who he was, and thus Remus just looked a little demented. Deceit wrinkled his nose as he held out a few of the larger pieces of the wall to his companion. Our first decision. Are we starting again entirely, or simply mending? Remus took the offered fragments. His breathing stuttered, and his own energies connected with the residual power left on the pieces. Mending. It will make us weaker,
he said, staring down at the luminescent slabs of bonded dark matter.
Completely reconstructing it will ensure that there are no faulty lines or cracks.
We will be drained rather quickly. Deceit hated to admit it, but his power wasn't limitless. His power came from Thomas, which meant that his strength was slowly waning. Those damn light sides had somehow managed to lend their host some strength. I'm sorry, Remus, but I'm not that strong. Remus's grin stretched wider.
Then we don't use our powers. Well, not entirely.
Elaborate. Remus handed the pieces back to Deceit. He patted them meaningfully.
Well, we have some batteries right here. I say we use them.
Once you begin, the voice from the void hissed suddenly, interrupting their conversation. I will turn my influence on Virgil. You must finish the wall and tap him behind it for our deal to be complete. No, Deceit said instinctively. Remus raised an eyebrow. Deceit breathed in deeply. Leave Virgil for the moment. Let me focus on Patton and on the wall. Once it is built, any effect the hidden dark energies have had on Virgil will fade and he will be strengthened against us. Time is our essence, Snake. You are afraid. Leave Virgil to me. If you want to ensure we succeed, then lend us your energy so that we can get the wall rebuilt. The voice from the void fell silent in reluctant agreement, and Deceit turned to Remus, who blew out a heavy breath.
Oh, shit,
the Duke said.
Deceit, I hope you know what the hell you're doing.
Oh, Deceit knew exactly what he was doing. He just wasn't doing what he promised. He just needed to get the wall built. Everything would be okay after that. Chapter 10. Rebuilding the wall was complicated. Deceit loathed to admit it, but the task was quickly becoming an impossible thing. It didn't seem to matter how much power he and Remus poured into it. The gleaming fragments are stilted. Empty space remained just that. Gleaming fragments and stilted empty space. Even with that damn voice helping, nothing was happening. Their energy was going nowhere. Remus fell onto his butt, splaying his legs and huffing.
This is useless,
he complained.
I don't know why I let you talk me into this.
I talked you into nothing, Remus. You did this to yourself.
Glad to see you're totally repentant,
Remus grumbled, crossing his arms. He looked for all the world like a pouting child. Deceit decided to keep that particular comment to himself. No use insulting the help. Besides, Remus had a point. What they were doing clearly wasn't working, but Deceit had no idea what else they could try. He could barely remember what they'd done to build the wall in the first place. He'd had Virgil beside him then. Not Remus. Maybe that made the difference. Maybe it didn't. Deceit didn't know anymore. Tick-tock, Deceit? He gritted his teeth and kicked at Remus's splayed legs. Get up, he hissed. We don't have much time for this. Remus snarled viciously, baring his teeth. Deceit wrinkled his nose, not phrased the slightest. Remus was only terrifying if you didn't know about his very limited supply of brain cells, and unfortunately, Deceit was very well past that small tidbit of information. What he was more concerned about was the fact that they weren't getting anywhere. Remus clambered to his feet slowly, grinning as someone of his joints cracked.
Are you sure we can't just rebuild it?
He questioned, poking the large piece in Deceit's hands solicitantly.
'Cause I don't know about you, but this is getting pretty damn tedious.
Deceit's lips pulled away from his teeth, his breath hissing out in front of him. If we build it, he said very tightly, then we will give all of our energy and cease to exist. Remus held his hands up and backed away, kicking at the rubble and remnants as he were debating whether or not to throw a tantrum. Deceit very seriously considered wrapping shadows around his neck and yanking. Somehow he figured the voice wouldn't approve of that move. He dropped the piece of wall, dusting his hands off. We shouldn't have to do this, he muttered to himself, feeling the shadow slip under his cloak and curl around him, trying to offer comfort. The wall shouldn't have broken, and the light sides shouldn't be winning, and Virgil shouldn't be there. He should be here, and maybe this wouldn't be such a mess. For a long moment, the only noise was Deceit's heavy breathing. Even Remus stood stock still, his foot raised in the air. The shadow screeched, faintly, swishing in agitation. Deceit didn't bother to soothe them, because he was already too far past composure. He just wanted Virgil back. Why couldn't he have that? He deserved to have Virgil by his side. He deserved to not be alone. He didn't deserve to be abandoned. He hadn't deserved to be thrown into the darkness all that time ago, but that had happened too. Finally, Remus snorted, breaking the tense silence. The fuck you want Virgil for? He cackled to himself and spun around. Right now, with his mellow vibes, the most he could do for us is fake spider to web the pieces together. You need to move past him, D. Move on. Focus on bigger things. What did you say? Deceit whirled around, the shadow scratching at his flesh cheek. He brushed them off half-heartedly as Remus stopped spinning. The crinkle in the Duke's brow proved he had absolutely no idea about the genius he was exhibiting. About the webs. Deceit cut himself off, feeling something hot build in his chest. Webs. Webs, it was right there! Oh, how had he not seen it? Virgil! It all spun back to Virgil! It all started and ended with Virgil, and Deceit let that hot power grow and grow until it was a part of him, and his veins were burning with it. He clicked his fingers absently, summoning Remus to his side. Grab a piece, he instructed, grabbing his own fragment before focusing on the heat racing through him. Carefully, oh so carefully, pulling out the faintest thread of it. It weaved around his fingers like a stray, living piece of twine, and he cooed at it, coaxing it onto the piece of the wall. What are you doing? Remus breathed. Deceit didn't answer, instead pushing the two pieces together and carefully leading the thin strand of power to the edge of the piece, pressing a finger against it to squish it to the side. He led it over to Remus's piece before squishing it there. His gloves warmed at the touch. The shadows recoiled with a hiss. The end result? A stitch. Deceit watched breathlessly as the yellow stitch forced that section of the two pieces together, fusing them back into one solid, glittering chunk. Remus swore quietly. Deceit stared, transfixed, as the black marble of the wall occasionally flickered with the slightest yellow glow. Remus thrust the kind of fixed section of wall into Deceit's hands, reaching down and grabbing another chunk. He smashed them together, his eager eyes wordlessly telling Deceit to create another stitch. Deceit took a breath, ignoring the shadows that clawed at his skin and shriveled in their whispery voices, and forced another strand of heat out. This time, the stitch landed side by side with a thin strand of green energy. When they both dissolved, all three pieces had completely sealed together. Remus laughed and laughed and laughed. Deceit said nothing, but forced another stitch and another. And another. The shadows dug deep enough to draw blood. Another, and another, and another. Virgil stumbled into the wall of his room, clawing at his chest as something yanked inside him. He could feel it, the energy that was being sucked out of him mercilessly. He knew the feeling, knew what it meant, and he hates it because it could only be Deceit that was rebuilding the wall. Deceit was rebuilding the wall, and Virgil couldn't fault him for it. Oh, God, it hurt. But Virgil was okay with it, because damn if it wasn't the smartest thing to do. The dark sides at full power had enough juice to completely decimate Thomas's mind. Even Virgil, with every single drop of power, was finding it hard to control himself around the other three. He was too full. He had too much power. He was towing the line, and now Deceit was rebuilding the wall, and Virgil was battling the urge to go back. He wanted to go back. He bit down on his lip as another tug sent stars wheeling across his vision. Another tug. And another. And another. Somewhere in the darkness, the ticking stopped. Thank you all so much for listening. If you'd like to hear more, I definitely am planning on releasing more of these. So if you'd like to subscribe to stay up to date with these next couple of videos, yeehaw, yeehaw. If you want to support me at all, go ahead, and Etsy shop is in my description. You can buy some beaded Sanderside stuff. That'd be super cool. With that being said, once again, thank you so much for listening. And much like Remus trying to figure out what the heck Deceit is doing, do your best!